The mirror of society. How literature reflects who we are and who we're becoming. Every great book is a mirror, but what it reflects is not just the characters within it. It shows us ourselves, our culture, our hopes, and our flaws. When we open a novel, we peer into the human condition as filtered through the imagination of another mind, and what we discover there is both universal and intensely personal. Literature doesn't simply entertain, it reveals. It holds up a looking glass to society, capturing not only who we are in this moment, but who we might become. This mirror has been reflecting humanity for thousands of years. From the ancient epics that codified heroic ideals to the contemporary novels that challenge our assumptions about identity and belonging, literature has served as both witness and prophet. It documents our struggles with power, love, justice, and meaning. It preserves our contradictions and illuminates our potential. Most importantly, it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our world. The stories we tell, and the stories we choose to elevate, reveal everything about our values, our fears, and our aspirations. They show us not just what we think we believe, but what we actually believe, often exposing the gap between our ideals and our actions. Literature is archaeology of the human spirit, preserving the emotional and intellectual landscape of each era while simultaneously shaping the consciousness of the next. But this mirror is not passive. It doesn't simply reflect, it refracts, it distorts, it amplifies. Through the lens of fiction, we see ourselves more clearly precisely because we're seeing ourselves indirectly. The distance that art creates allows us to examine our own lives and societies with a clarity that direct observation often obscures. We can acknowledge harsh truths about fictional characters that we might resist recognizing in ourselves. We can feel empathy for struggles that feel too threatening to acknowledge when they're happening in our own communities. This is why authoritarian regimes fear literature. They understand that stories have the power to reshape how people see themselves and their world. A novel can make the invisible visible, can give voice to the silenced, can make the abstract concrete. It can plant seeds of doubt in the most certain minds and offer hope to the most desperate hearts. Literature is dangerous because it expands the realm of possibility, showing us that the way things are is not the only way things could be. Chapter 1. Literature as a cultural mirror. Human beings are storytelling creatures. Long before we developed writing systems, we were gathering around fires, sharing tales that made sense of our world. These early stories served multiple functions. They entertained, they preserved knowledge, they reinforced social bonds, and they transmitted values from one generation to the next. They were, in essence, the first mirrors of society, reflecting back to communities their own beliefs, fears, and dreams. The transition from oral to written literature marked a profound shift in human consciousness. When stories could be preserved exactly as their authors intended, they became permanent witnesses to their time. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving literary works, reveals not just the story of a legendary king, but the values and anxieties of ancient Mesopotamian civilization. Its themes of friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning resonate across millennia because they capture something essential about the human experience. As civilizations grew more complex, so did their literature. The Greek tragedies of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides didn't just tell stories of gods and heroes. They grappled with questions of fate, justice, and moral responsibility that were central to Athenian democracy. These plays served as a kind of public forum, allowing citizens to explore through art the same questions they debated in the agora. The theater became a space where society could examine itself, where difficult truths could be spoken through the mouths of mythological characters. Medieval literature reflected the hierarchical, deeply religious worldview of its time. The great epics like Beowulf and the Song of Roland celebrated warrior virtues and loyalty to Lord and God. Dante's Divine Comedy mapped the entire medieval cosmos, creating a literary universe that perfectly reflected the theological and philosophical understanding of his age. These works weren't just entertainment, they were instruction manuals for how to live in a world where earthly existence was understood as a brief prelude to eternal judgment. The Renaissance brought a new kind of literature, one that reflected the period's renewed interest in individual human experience. Shakespeare's plays, with their complex psychological portraits and moral ambiguity, mirrored a society that was beginning to question traditional authorities and explore new possibilities for human agency. His characters weren't just types or symbols, they were individuals struggling with recognizably human dilemmas. In Hamlet's existential crisis, audiences could see their own doubts about certainty and authority. In Lady Macbeth's guilt, they could recognize the psychological cost of ambition. The novel, emerging in the 18th century, became the perfect literary form for an increasingly individualistic and democratic age. Writers like Daniel Defoe, Samuel Richardson, and Jane Austen created detailed portraits of ordinary people navigating the complexities of social and personal relationships. These novels reflected a society that was becoming more mobile, more commercial, and more concerned with individual happiness and fulfillment. They also reflected new anxieties about social mobility, gender roles, and the tension between personal desire and social expectation. As the industrial age transformed society, literature transformed with it. The works of Charles Dickens didn't just tell stories, they campaigned for social reform. His novels like Oliver Twist and Hard Times exposed the brutal conditions of industrial life, forcing readers to confront the human cost of economic progress. This was literature as social conscience, using the power of storytelling to challenge readers' assumptions about poverty, class, and social responsibility. The 20th century brought unprecedented upheaval, and literature reflected this chaos and transformation. The fragmented narratives of modernist writers like James Joyce and Virginia Woolf mirrored a world where traditional certainties had been shattered by war, scientific revolution, and social change. Their experimental techniques weren't just artistic choices, they were attempts to capture the disorientation and complexity of modern experience. Contemporary literature continues this tradition of reflection and revelation. Writers like Toni Morrison, Salman Rushdie, and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie use their work to explore questions of identity, belonging, and power in an increasingly globalized world. Their novels reflect our current struggles with issues of race, immigration, cultural identity, and the legacy of colonialism. They show us a world that is both more connected and more divided than ever before. But literature doesn't just reflect society passively, it also shapes it. The stories we tell about ourselves become part of how we understand ourselves. When Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, she wasn't just reflecting the reality of slavery, she was actively working to change public opinion about it. When George Orwell wrote 1984, he wasn't just commenting on totalitarianism, he was warning against it, giving us a vocabulary for understanding and resisting authoritarian control. This is the power of literature as a cultural mirror. It shows us who we are, but it also shows us who we might become. It preserves our current moment while simultaneously imagining alternatives. It comforts us with familiar truths while challenging us with uncomfortable questions. Most importantly, it reminds us that the human story is still being written and that each of us has a role to play in shaping its next chapter. Chapter 2. Class, Conflict, and Identity in the Novel. The novel has always been democracy's literary form, born from the rise of the middle class and the expanding possibilities for individual advancement in modern society. Yet paradoxically, some of the most powerful novels have been those that expose the rigid class structures that limit human potential and dignity. Through the lens of fiction, writers have revealed the ways in which economic inequality shapes not just material conditions, but the very possibilities of human experience. Charles Dickens understood this better than perhaps any writer before or since. His London was a city of stark contrasts, where wealth and poverty existed in close proximity but rarely in meaningful contact. In novels like Bleak House and Great Expectations, Dickens created a literary map of Victorian society that exposed the arbitrary nature of class distinctions and the devastating human consequences of economic inequality. His characters moved between different social worlds, and through their eyes, readers could see how the same human qualities might be valued or despised depending on the social context in which they appeared. Pip's journey in Great Expectations is particularly revealing in this regard. His transformation from blacksmith's apprentice to gentleman exposes the artificial nature of class distinctions, while simultaneously showing how deeply these distinctions are internalized by those who live within them. Pip's shame about his origins, his adoption of the prejudices of his new class, and his eventual recognition of the moral superiority of those he left behind create a complex portrait of how class identity shapes both external circumstances and internal character. But Dickens was writing about a specific historical moment when the boundaries between classes were becoming more fluid even as they remained powerfully influential. The 20th century brought new forms of class consciousness and new literary voices to articulate the experience of those traditionally excluded from literary representation. The Harlem Renaissance produced writers like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, who created literature that celebrated African American culture while simultaneously protesting the systems that oppressed it. James Baldwin took this tradition further, using the novel to explore not just the external conditions of racial oppression, but the internal psychological effects of living in a society that devalues your humanity. In novels like Go Tell It on the Mountain and Giovanni's Room, Baldwin created characters who struggle not just with external barriers, but with the ways those barriers have shaped their understanding of themselves. His work reveals how oppression operates not just through laws and institutions, but through the internalization of limiting beliefs about what is possible for someone of a particular race, class, or sexual orientation. The power of Baldwin's work lies in its refusal to present simple victims or simple villains. His characters are complex individuals whose choices are shaped by historical forces beyond their control, yet who retain the capacity for moral agency within those constraints. This complexity allows readers to understand oppression not as an abstract political concept, but as a lived human experience that shapes every aspect of a person's relationship to the world. Contemporary writers have continued this tradition of using literature to explore the intersections of class, race, and identity. Toni Morrison's novels create a literary universe in which the legacy of slavery continues to shape the possibilities available to African American characters. Her work reveals how historical trauma becomes embedded in families and communities, passing from generation to generation in ways that are both subtle and profound. In Beloved, Morrison shows how the violence of slavery extends far beyond the immediate physical harm it inflicts. The novel's central character, Sethi, is haunted not just by the memory of her enslaved past, but by the ghost of the daughter she killed, rather than see returned to slavery. This haunting operates on multiple levels. It's a supernatural presence, a psychological trauma, and a metaphor for the way historical injustice continues to shape present experience. Morrison's technique of magical realism allows her to represent experiences that resist conventional literary representation. The Ghost of Beloved makes visible the invisible wounds of slavery, giving form to trauma that might otherwise remain abstract. This is literature functioning as both mirror and microscope, reflecting social reality while also magnifying aspects of that reality that might otherwise be overlooked or minimized. The global perspective of contemporary literature has also expanded our understanding of how class and identity intersect. Writers like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and Mohsin Hamid explore how economic inequality operates in a globalized world, where the advantages of birth in one country versus another can shape life possibilities as dramatically as class distinctions within a single society. Adichie's Americana follows a Nigerian woman's journey to America for education, revealing how immigration transforms not just economic circumstances, but identity itself. The novel shows how the categories of race and class that seem natural in one cultural context become strange and limiting in another. Its protagonist discovers that in America, she is not just Nigerian but Black, a category that carries meanings and restrictions she never experienced in her home country. This global perspective reveals how the categories we use to understand identity are both culturally specific and historically contingent. What seems like a natural distinction in one time and place appears arbitrary in another. Literature helps us see these distinctions as human constructions rather than natural facts, opening up possibilities for imagining alternatives. The novel's power to reveal class and identity as constructed rather than natural is one of its most subversive qualities. By showing us characters who move between different social worlds, who challenge the boundaries of their assigned identities, who reveal the arbitrariness of social hierarchies, literature undermines the systems that depend on these hierarchies seeming natural and inevitable. This is why literature has always been suspect to those who benefit from existing power structures. A novel that shows a working-class character capable of nobility, intelligence, and moral insight challenges the assumptions that justify economic inequality. A novel that reveals the common humanity across racial lines undermines the logic of racial oppression. A novel that shows the constructed nature of gender roles opens up possibilities for social change. The mirror of literature reflects not just the world as it is, but the world as it could be, in showing us characters who transcend the limitations of their circumstances, who challenge the expectations of their social roles, who create new possibilities for human flourishing. Literature becomes a tool for social transformation. It shows us that the identities we inhabit are not fixed destinies, but ongoing creations, always open to revision and always capable of surprise. Chapter 3: Gender, Power, and the Written Word. For most of human history, literature was largely a male domain. Women's voices were marginalized, their stories untold or told by others, their experiences filtered through masculine perspectives that often misunderstood or misrepresented them. But women have always been writing, even when their work was dismissed, suppressed, or attributed to male authors. The emergence of women's voices in literature represents one of the most significant expansions of human consciousness in the modern era, revealing experiences and perspectives that had been hidden for centuries. The constraints placed on women's literary expression were both practical and ideological. In societies where women were denied formal education, where their economic opportunities were limited, where their social roles were narrowly defined, the act of writing itself was a form of rebellion. When women like Christine de Pizan in the medieval period, or Afra Ben in the 17th century claimed the right to write professionally, they were challenging fundamental assumptions about women's capabilities and proper roles. The novel, as it developed in the 18th and 19th centuries, provided a particularly powerful vehicle for women's literary expression. Writers like Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, and George Eliot created complex female characters who struggled with the limitations of their social roles while asserting their own moral and intellectual authority. These novels didn't just tell women's stories, they established new models for what women could be and do. Jane Austen's novels are particularly revealing in this regard. Writing at a time when women's legal and economic options were severely limited, Austen created heroines who navigate these constraints with intelligence, wit, and moral conviction. Elizabeth Bennet's refusal to marry for economic security alone, her insistence on mutual respect and affection as the basis for marriage, represents a quiet but profound challenge to the social system that reduced women to economic assets in marital negotiations. But Austen's critique operates through irony and indirection rather than direct confrontation. Her novels reveal the absurdities and injustices of women's social position while appearing to accept them. This strategy allowed her to reach readers who might have rejected a more direct challenge to social conventions, while still planting seeds of doubt about the naturalness and justice of women's subordination. The Bronte sisters took a more direct approach, creating heroines who openly challenge social expectations and demand recognition as autonomous individuals. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre declares her spiritual equality with men in terms that would have been scandalous to many contemporary readers. Jane's famous declaration to Rochester that she has as much soul as you and full as much heart articulates a claim for women's full humanity that challenges centuries of legal and theological doctrine. Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights goes even further, creating in Catherine Earnshaw a character who refuses all social conventions and whose passionate nature ultimately destroys the social order that cannot contain her. The novel's wild, untamed landscape mirrors Catherine's refusal to be domesticated by social expectations. Her declaration that she is Heathcliff suggests a vision of human identity that transcends conventional gender roles entirely. The use of male pseudonyms by writers like George Eliot and George Sand reveals the double bind faced by women writers. To be taken seriously, they had to disguise their gender, yet their work often explored specifically female experiences and perspectives. This tension between public identity and private truth reflects the broader struggles of women in societies that denied them full participation in public life. The 20th century brought new possibilities for women's literary expression, along with new forms of resistance to women's expanded roles. The modernist movement included important female voices like Virginia Woolf and Gertrude Stein, who experimented with narrative techniques that challenged traditional ways of representing consciousness and experience. Woolf's stream of consciousness technique, in particular, seemed to capture something essential about the way women's minds worked, the way they processed multiple layers of experience simultaneously. Woolf's essay, A Room of One's Own, articulated the material conditions necessary for women's literary creation. Her argument that women needed both financial independence and physical space to write revealed how women's exclusion from literature was not just a matter of individual choice, but of systemic discrimination. Her famous speculation about Shakespeare's hypothetical sister, who would have been denied the opportunities that allowed his genius to flourish, exposed the waste of human potential that such discrimination represented. The feminist movement of the 1960s and 1970s brought an explosion of women's writing that challenged not just women's exclusion from literature, but the very definitions of what literature could be. Writers like Sylvia Plath, Adrienne Rich, and Audre Lorde created works that explored women's experiences of sexuality, motherhood, mental illness, and social oppression with unprecedented honesty and power. This literature didn't just give voice to women's experiences, it challenged the assumption that male experience was universal while female experience was particular. It revealed how supposedly universal themes and perspectives were actually male-specific, shaped by masculine assumptions about what was important and meaningful. By centering women's experiences, these writers expanded the range of human experience that literature could encompass. The concept of intersectionality, developed by scholars like Kimberlé Crenshaw, found powerful expression in literature that explored how gender intersects with race, class, sexuality, and other forms of identity. Writers like Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, and Gloria Anzaldúa created works that showed how women's experiences cannot be understood apart from their racial, economic, and cultural contexts. Morrison's novels, in particular, reveal how the experience of being a woman is shaped by the experience of being a Black woman in America. Her characters face not just the limitations that society places on women, but the specific forms of violence and discrimination that Black women have historically endured. Her work reveals how gender and race intersect to create unique forms of oppression that cannot be understood by examining either category alone. Contemporary literature has continued to expand our understanding of gender and power. Writers like Margaret Atwood, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and Roxane Gay have created works that explore how traditional gender roles are being challenged and redefined in contemporary society. Their work reveals how the struggle for gender equality is ongoing, taking new forms in response to changing social conditions. Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale has become particularly relevant in contemporary discussions of women's rights. Written in 1000, 1985, the novel imagines a future society where women's bodies are controlled by the state for reproductive purposes. The novel's vision of women reduced to their biological functions serves as a warning about the potential consequences of rolling back women's rights. Its continuing popularity suggests that many readers see its dystopian vision as a cautionary tale rather than a fantasy. The emergence of non-binary and transgender voices in contemporary literature has further expanded our understanding of gender as a social construction rather than a biological destiny. Writers like Tori Peters, Akwaeke Emezi, and Casey Plett have created works that explore the fluidity of gender identity and the violence that can result from rigid gender categories. This expansion of gender representation in literature reflects broader social changes in how we understand identity and human possibility. Literature has not just reflected these changes, it has helped to create them. By representing diverse gender experiences, by challenging traditional gender roles, by revealing the constructed nature of gender categories, literature has played a crucial role in expanding the possibilities for human flourishing. The mirror of literature reveals that gender, like class and race, is not a fixed destiny but an ongoing negotiation between individual agency and social constraint. The women and gender non-conforming writers who have claimed their voices in literature have not just told their own stories, they have expanded the human story itself, revealing aspects of experience that had been hidden or suppressed. In doing so, they have made literature more complete, more honest, and more truly representative of the full range of human possibility. Chapter 4. Dystopia and Utopia as Warnings. The human imagination has always been drawn to the extremes of possibility, to visions of perfect worlds and nightmarish futures. Literature that explores these extremes serves a crucial function in society, acting as both warning and inspiration. Dystopian literature, in particular, has proven to be one of the most powerful forms of social criticism, using the projection of current trends into imagined futures to reveal the dangers inherent in present conditions. The power of dystopian literature lies in its ability to make abstract political concepts concrete and personal. When George Orwell wrote 1984, he wasn't just critiquing totalitarianism as a political system, he was showing how totalitarian control operates at the most intimate level of human experience. His vision of a society where even thoughts are monitored and controlled, where language itself is manipulated to limit the possibility of dissent, made the abstract concept of totalitarianism viscerally real for readers. The novel's enduring relevance suggests that Orwell succeeded in identifying something essential about the relationship between power and truth. His concepts of doublethink, newspeak, and the memory hole have become part of our political vocabulary because they capture real phenomena that exist in various forms in democratic societies, as well as totalitarian ones. The novel serves as a kind of diagnostic tool, helping readers recognize the early signs of authoritarian control in their own societies. Orwell's achievement was to show how political oppression operates not just through external force, but through the manipulation of consciousness itself. His protagonist, Winston Smith's struggle to maintain his own memories and perceptions against the state's insistence on alternative facts, reveals how totalitarian control depends on the destruction of individual agency and judgment. The novel's most terrifying insight is that under sufficient pressure, human beings can be made to believe anything, even to love their oppressors. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World offers a different but equally chilling vision of social control. Where Orwell imagined a society controlled through fear and violence, Huxley envisioned one controlled through pleasure and distraction. His world state maintains order not by suppressing desires but by satisfying them so completely that the desire for freedom itself disappears. Citizens are kept docile through a combination of genetic engineering, psychological conditioning, and the drug soma, which provides instant relief from any discomfort or dissatisfaction. Huxley's vision has proven remarkably prescient in an age of social media, consumer culture, and pharmaceutical solutions to existential problems. His insight that societies can be controlled through the satisfaction of artificial needs rather than the suppression of natural ones, offers a powerful critique of contemporary culture. The novel suggests that the greatest threat to human freedom may not be external oppression, but the willing surrender of autonomy in exchange for comfort and convenience. The dystopian tradition has been particularly enriched by women writers who have explored how authoritarian control operates through the regulation of gender and sexuality. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale imagines a society where women's bodies are controlled by the state for reproductive purposes. The novel's vision of women reduced to their biological functions serves as a warning about the potential consequences of rolling back women's rights. Atwood's genius lies in her recognition that dystopian control often begins with the targeting of marginalized groups. Her Republic of Gilead doesn't emerge through a sudden revolution, but through a gradual erosion of rights that begins with restrictions on women's economic and reproductive freedom. The novel shows how quickly a society can slide from democracy to authoritarianism when citizens become complacent about their rights. The narrator offers internal resistance to her society's attempts to erase her individual identity, reveals how totalitarian control depends on the destruction of memory and personal history. Her secret recollection of her former life, her real name, and her lost relationships becomes a form of resistance that the state cannot fully control. The novel suggests that the preservation of individual memory and identity is essential to maintaining human dignity under oppressive conditions. Contemporary dystopian literature has grappled with new forms of potential oppression that reflect current technological and social conditions. Novels like Dave Eggers' The Circle explore how surveillance can be normalized through the promise of convenience and connection. The novel's vision of a world where privacy is eliminated in the name of transparency and efficiency reflects contemporary anxieties about social media and data collection. The power of dystopian literature lies not just in its warnings, but in its ability to make readers more aware of the conditions that make such nightmares possible. By showing how ordinary people can become complicit in their own oppression, these novels encourage readers to examine their own societies and their own choices more critically. They reveal how the erosion of freedom often happens gradually, through the acceptance of small compromises that seem reasonable at the time but accumulate into something monstrous. Utopian literature, though less prominent in contemporary culture, serves an equally important function. Writers like Ursula K. Le Guin have created visions of alternative societies that challenge readers to imagine different ways of organizing human relationships. Her novel, The Dispossessed, presents a society based on anarchist principles, exploring both the possibilities and the challenges of a world without private property or hierarchical authority. Le Guin's achievement is to show that utopian societies are not perfect societies but different societies, with their own problems and contradictions. Her protagonist, Shevik's journey between two worlds, reveals how different social arrangements create different possibilities for human flourishing and different forms of limitation. The novel suggests that the value of utopian thinking lies not in providing blueprints for perfect societies, but in expanding our sense of what is possible. The feminist utopian tradition has been particularly rich in imagining alternatives to patriarchal social arrangements. Writers like Marge Piercy, Joanna Russ, and Octavia Butler have created worlds where gender roles are fundamentally different, where reproduction is separated from biology, where power is distributed more equally. These works serve as thought experiments that help readers imagine how different social arrangements might affect human relationships and possibilities. Butler's work is particularly important in this regard because it avoids the trap of presenting utopia as a static end state. Her novels show societies in process, struggling with contradictions and conflicts that arise even in more just social arrangements. Her Parable series, in particular, presents a vision of social change that is both hopeful and realistic, showing how communities can be built and sustained even in the face of environmental and social collapse. The climate crisis has inspired a new wave of speculative fiction that grapples with the long-term consequences of environmental destruction. Writers like Kim Stanley Robinson and Paolo Bacigalupi have created works that explore how climate change might reshape human civilization. These novels serve as both warnings about the consequences of environmental destruction and explorations of how human societies might adapt to changed conditions. The power of speculative literature lies in its ability to make abstract future possibilities concrete and immediate. By showing how current trends might play out over time, these works help readers understand the stakes of present decisions. They reveal how individual choices and social policies can have consequences that extend far beyond their immediate effects. The mirror of dystopian and utopian literature reflects both our deepest fears and our highest aspirations. It shows us the potential consequences of our current choices, while also revealing alternative possibilities that we might not have considered. Most importantly, it reminds us that the future is not predetermined, but is shaped by the decisions we make in the present. In showing us worlds we would prefer to avoid and worlds we might hope to create, speculative literature empowers us to take responsibility for shaping the world we actually inhabit. Chapter 5. The Reader as Citizen. Reading is not a passive activity. Every time we open a book, we enter into a relationship with another consciousness, allowing their thoughts and experiences to reshape our understanding of the world. This process of imaginative engagement has profound implications for how we function as citizens in a democratic society. Literature doesn't just reflect the world, it shapes the people who read it, and those people, in turn, shape the world. The connection between reading and citizenship has been recognized since the earliest days of democratic theory. The founders of the American Republic understood that democracy depends on an informed and thoughtful citizenry capable of making complex judgments about public policy and social issues. They believed that education, particularly literary education, was essential to developing the intellectual and moral capacities necessary for democratic participation. But the relationship between literature and citizenship goes deeper than simply providing information or developing critical thinking skills. Literature develops empathy, the ability to understand and share the experiences of others. This capacity for imaginative identification with people different from ourselves is fundamental to democratic society, which depends on the ability of diverse groups to find common ground and work together for the common good. When we read a novel, we temporarily inhabit the consciousness of characters who may be radically different from ourselves. We experience their struggles, their hopes, their fears, and their moral dilemmas from the inside. This process of imaginative identification expands our sense of human possibility and challenges our assumptions about what people are like and what motivates their behavior. Consider the impact of reading Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird on readers who have never experienced racial prejudice directly. Through Scout Finch's eyes, they witness the injustice of racial discrimination and the courage required to resist it. The novel doesn't just tell readers that racism is wrong, it makes them feel the wrongness of it, experience the human cost of prejudice, and understand the moral imperative to oppose it. This empathetic engagement with literature has measurable effects on readers' attitudes and behavior. Research has shown that people who read literary fiction score higher on measures of empathy and social understanding than those who don't. They are better at recognizing emotions in others, more accurate in their judgments about people's motivations, and more likely to engage in pro-social behavior. The mechanism behind this effect seems to be the practice of perspective-taking that literary reading requires. When we read a novel, we must constantly shift between different characters' viewpoints, understand their different motivations, and track the complex relationships between them. This mental exercise strengthens our ability to understand multiple perspectives in real-world situations. Literature also develops our capacity for moral reasoning by presenting us with complex ethical dilemmas that have no easy answers. Great novels rarely present simple conflicts between good and evil. Instead, they show us characters facing difficult choices where multiple values conflict and where any decision involves significant costs. This complexity mirrors the moral challenges we face in our own lives and in our roles as citizens. Consider the moral complexity of Jean Valjean's theft of bread in Victor Hugo's Les Misérables. The novel presents a situation where the law and justice conflict, where survival and social order are at odds. Readers must grapple with questions about the nature of justice, the role of mercy, and the relationship between individual need and social responsibility. This kind of moral reasoning is essential to democratic citizenship, which regularly requires us to make judgments about competing values and priorities. Literature also serves as a repository of moral wisdom, preserving the insights and experiences of previous generations for contemporary readers. The great works of world literature represent humanity's ongoing conversation with itself about the fundamental questions of existence. How should we live? What do we owe to one another? What constitutes a good society? By engaging with this tradition, readers gain access to the accumulated wisdom of human civilization. But literature doesn't just preserve traditional wisdom, it also challenges it. New voices and perspectives constantly emerge to question established assumptions and expand our understanding of human possibility. The works of previously marginalized writers force us to confront the limitations of our own perspectives and consider alternative ways of understanding the world. The emergence of post-colonial literature, for example, has challenged Western readers to confront the legacy of colonialism and understand how it continues to shape global relationships. Writers like Chinua Achebe, Salman Rushdie, and Arundhati Roy have created works that reveal the perspectives of those who were colonized, showing how the same historical events look very different from the other side of the power relationship. This expansion of literary voices has profound implications for democratic citizenship. In an increasingly diverse and globalized world, the ability to understand multiple perspectives is essential to effective governance. Literature helps prepare citizens for this reality by exposing them to a wide range of viewpoints and experiences. The digital age has created new opportunities and challenges for literary citizenship. On one hand, technology has made literature more accessible than ever before. Ebooks, audiobooks, and online resources have removed many of the barriers that previously limited access to literary works. Social media has created new communities of readers who can share their responses to literature and engage in discussions about its meaning and significance. On the other hand, the same technology that makes literature more accessible also creates new distractions and alternative forms of entertainment that compete for readers' attention. The rapid pace of digital communication can undermine the kind of sustained attention that literary reading requires. The tendency toward immediate gratification in digital media can make the delayed rewards of literary engagement seem less appealing. These technological changes raise important questions about the future of literary culture and its role in democratic society. If literature plays a crucial role in developing the capacities necessary for democratic citizenship, what happens to democracy if fewer people read literature? How can we preserve the benefits of literary engagement in an age of digital distraction? The answer may lie in recognizing that the essential function of literature is not tied to any particular medium, but to the process of imaginative engagement itself. Whether delivered through print books, digital devices, or audio formats, literature retains its power to expand empathy, develop moral reasoning, and challenge assumptions. The key is ensuring that people continue to engage with complex, challenging narratives that require sustained attention and deep reflection. Educational institutions have a crucial role to play in this process. Literature education should not just teach students to analyze texts, but should help them understand the value of literary engagement for their own lives and their roles as citizens. This means moving beyond technical analysis to explore how literature can inform moral reasoning, expand empathy, and provide guidance for navigating complex social and political issues. The future of democratic society may depend, in part, on our ability to preserve and transmit the capacity for the kind of deep, sustained engagement with complex narratives that literature requires. In an age of information overload and shortened attention spans, the ability to read slowly, think carefully, and consider multiple perspectives becomes even more valuable. Literature offers us a unique form of education in humanity. It teaches us not just what to think, but how to think, not just what to feel, but how to feel. It expands our capacity for understanding and compassion, while also challenging us to examine our own assumptions and biases. In doing so, it prepares us to be better citizens, more capable of the kind of thoughtful engagement that democracy requires. The reader, as citizen, is not a passive recipient of information, but an active participant in the ongoing conversation about how we should live together. Literature provides the tools for this participation, the imaginative resources necessary for understanding others and working toward the common good. In this sense, every act of reading is a civic act, contributing to the health and vitality of democratic society. Chapter 6. Beyond the page. What literature demands of us. Literature does not end when we close the book. The stories we read become part of who we are, shaping our understanding of ourselves and our world long after we've finished reading. This transformation places demands on us as readers and as human beings. Literature asks us to be more than consumers of entertainment. It asks us to be active participants in the ongoing human conversation about meaning, morality, and possibility. The first demand literature makes is that we take it seriously. This doesn't mean approaching every novel with grim academic solemnity, but it does mean recognizing that literature is not just escapism or entertainment. The great works of world literature are attempts to grapple with the fundamental questions of human existence, and they deserve our thoughtful engagement. Taking literature seriously means reading with attention and intention. It means being willing to slow down, to reread difficult passages, to sit with uncertainty when a text challenges our assumptions. It means recognizing that the difficulty of some literary works is not a bug, but a feature that the complexity of great literature mirrors the complexity of life itself. This demand for serious engagement goes against many contemporary cultural trends. We live in an age of rapid consumption, where information is processed quickly and discarded just as quickly. Literature asks us to resist this tendency, to dwell with ideas and images, to let them work on us over time. The rewards of this slower, more contemplative approach are profound, but they require patience and commitment. Literature also demands that we bring our whole selves to the reading experience. It asks us to engage not just intellectually, but emotionally, imaginatively, and morally. When we read about characters facing difficult choices, we are implicitly asked to consider what we would do in their situation. When we encounter unfamiliar perspectives, we are challenged to expand our understanding of human possibility. This emotional engagement can be uncomfortable. Literature often confronts us with experiences we would prefer to avoid: suffering, injustice, moral ambiguity, the inevitability of death. It's tempting to distance ourselves from these difficult realities, to treat them as merely fictional constructs that have no bearing on our own lives. But literature's power lies precisely in its ability to make these experiences real and immediate, to force us to confront aspects of existence that we might otherwise ignore. The demand for emotional engagement also means that literature can change us in ways we don't expect or control. We may begin reading a novel with certain assumptions about the world, only to find those assumptions challenged or undermined by the story. We may discover empathy for characters we initially disliked, or find ourselves questioning beliefs we thought were unshakable. This transformative potential of literature is both its greatest gift and its greatest challenge. It offers us the possibility of growth, of expanding our understanding and deepening our humanity. But it also requires us to be vulnerable, to risk having our comfortable certainties disturbed. Literature demands not just that we read, but that we read diversely. The mirror of literature can only show us the full complexity of human experience if we expose ourselves to a wide range of voices and perspectives. This means reading works by authors from different cultural backgrounds, different historical periods, different social positions. It means venturing beyond our comfort zones and encountering worldviews that may be radically different from our own. This diversity of reading is particularly important in our current moment of cultural polarization. When we limit ourselves to perspectives that confirm our existing beliefs, we create echo chambers that reinforce our biases and blind us to the complexity of social issues. Literature offers an antidote to this tendency by exposing us to the full range of human experience and forcing us to grapple with perspectives we might otherwise dismiss. Reading diversely also means reading beyond the traditional canon of great books that has historically been dominated by white, male, Western voices. While these works remain important, they represent only a fraction of human literary achievement. The expansion of literary curricula to include previously marginalized voices has revealed the richness and diversity of human creativity that was long overlooked. Literature demands that we become active interpreters rather than passive consumers. Every work of literature is incomplete without the reader's participation. The meaning of a text emerges from the interaction between the author's words and the reader's imagination, experience, and understanding. This means that reading is a creative act, not just a receptive one. This active interpretation requires us to develop our critical thinking skills, to learn to analyze and evaluate what we read. It means asking questions about the text's assumptions, considering alternative interpretations, and making connections between the work and our own experience. It means being willing to disagree with authors, to find fault with beloved works, and to discover new meanings in familiar texts. The demand for active interpretation also means that we must take responsibility for what we take from literature. We cannot simply blame authors for the ideas we encounter in their works. We must engage with those ideas critically and thoughtfully. This is particularly important when reading works that contain offensive or problematic content. Rather than simply rejecting such works, we must grapple with them, understanding their historical context while also recognizing their limitations. Literature demands that we share what we've learned. The insights and experiences we gain from reading are not meant to be hoarded, but shared. This sharing can take many forms: discussing books with friends, writing reviews, teaching literature to others, or simply letting the lessons of literature influence how we treat the people in our lives. The social dimension of literature is crucial to its function as a cultural force. Literature creates communities of readers who share common references and experiences. These communities become spaces for dialogue and debate about the issues that matter most to human life. They provide forums for exploring different interpretations and for considering the implications of literary works for contemporary life. In our digital age, these communities of readers have expanded beyond traditional boundaries. Online book clubs, social media discussions, and digital humanities projects have created new ways for readers to connect and share their responses to literature. These platforms have democratized literary discourse, allowing voices that might not have been heard in traditional academic or literary settings to participate in the conversation. Literature also demands that we apply its lessons to our own lives. The insights we gain from reading should not remain abstract intellectual exercises, but should inform how we live, how we treat others, and how we understand our place in the world. This application is not always direct, or simple literature rarely provides clear prescriptions for action. Instead, it offers us models for thinking about complex issues and examples of how others have navigated similar challenges. The ethical dimension of this demand is particularly important. Literature often confronts us with moral dilemmas and challenges us to consider what we would do in similar situations. The characters we encounter in literature serve as moral exemplars, both positive and negative, showing us the consequences of different choices and the complexity of ethical decision-making. Literature demands that we recognize our responsibility to future generations. The literary tradition we inherit is not a fixed monument, but a living conversation that continues to evolve. Each generation of readers must decide which works to preserve and celebrate, which voices to elevate, and which stories to tell. We are not just consumers of literature, but also its curators and guardians. This responsibility is particularly acute in our current moment, when the future of literary culture is uncertain. The rise of digital media has created new opportunities for literary expression and engagement, but it has also created new challenges. The shortened attention spans encouraged by digital media can make the sustained engagement that literature requires more difficult. The proliferation of information can make it harder to distinguish between works of lasting value and those that provide only temporary entertainment. Finally, literature demands that we maintain hope. Even the darkest literary works, the most devastating critiques of human nature and society, contain within them the seeds of possibility. The very act of creating literature, of bearing witness to human experience through art, is an act of faith in the value of human existence and the possibility of understanding and change. This hope is not naive optimism, but a hard-won understanding that human beings are capable of growth, compassion, and transformation. Literature shows us the worst of human nature, but it also shows us the best. It reveals our capacity for cruelty and selfishness, but it also reveals our capacity for love, sacrifice, and transcendence. The mirror of literature reflects not just who we are, but who we might become. It shows us the full range of human possibility and challenges us to choose the better angels of our nature. In accepting literature's demands to read seriously, to engage emotionally, to interpret actively, to share generously, to apply practically, and to hope persistently, we participate in the ongoing project of human flourishing. Literature is not a luxury or a mere diversion, but a necessity for fully human life. It provides us with the tools for understanding ourselves and others, for navigating the complexities of existence, and for imagining better worlds. In return, it asks us to be worthy of its gifts, to rise to the challenge of its demands, and to carry forward the conversation it has begun. The books we read become part of who we are, but what we do with that reading determines who we become. Literature offers us the possibility of transformation, but it is up to us to accept that offer and to live up to its promise. In doing so, we honor not just the authors who have given us their words, but the full human community of which we are part. This is literature's ultimate demand, that we become more fully human through our engagement with the human story in all its complexity and beauty. It is a demand that requires everything we have to give, but it offers, in return, nothing less than the possibility of a life lived with greater understanding, compassion, and purpose. In accepting this demand, we join the great conversation that has been going on since human beings first began to tell stories about themselves and their world. We become not just readers, but participants in the ongoing creation of human meaning and possibility. The mirror of literature shows us who we are and who we might become. What we see there and what we do with that vision is up to us. The story continues, and we are both its readers and its authors. The page turns, and we must decide what comes next.